There's nothing. Kidder, we can't hear you.
Sorry about that. Same old story. I keep on meaning to buy myself a remote mouse so that I can fix that from here, but somehow it never happens. So sorry, just a couple things. Can you see Geshe and myself okay?
Yeah.
It's good for everybody?
I think so.
And you can hear us okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not a hot day, but we have a lot of mozzies around, and seeing as we don't want to harm the mozzies, I turn the fans on just so that they're not biting us during the teaching. So if the fan noise is irritating you, after we do the preliminary prayers, let me know, and I'll turn the sound for musicians off. So just let me know. And and he said, so Geshe said, Tashi Dele, welcome to everybody. Can you hear Geshe okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So Tashi Dele, greetings to everyone. Geshe hopes that you are all well and happy, and Geshe also hopes that you are all coming closer to recognizing the positive nature of the fundamental mind and nourishing those qualities with your study and practice like water and fertilizer. And remember that in the Buddha's teachings also, he states very clearly that there is not a single sentient being that one can point to who is completely without a positive potential, who is completely without a virtuous seed. So all sentient beings share this kind of common characteristic, which is that eventually we will get there and improve and improve. It's just the timing of various sentient beings is different depending on our personal situations and circumstances. So don't forget that piece of advice, because later on in the teaching, Geshe is going to tell a story that relates to this principle. So what is being spoken here, of course, is the Dharma. And we can understand the Dharma as being like a mirror. And so the three doors of our body, speech, and mind and the related activities, in this analogy, they are like the reflections in the mirror. So if we want to see, right, if there's like some dust or something, some kind of dirt on our face, right, we look at the reflection of our face in the mirror. That's how we identify the dust or the dirt. So we can see that the Dharma is like a mirror which allows us to examine our actions, our activities of body, speech, and mind, and identify them as either wholesome or unwholesome. So if we are able to identify, right, as wholesome or unwholesome, and adapt our behaviors of body, speech, and mind accordingly, we are definitely capable of improvement. And so within the sort of many different branches of the Dharma that can be studied, our main topic here is the teachings of the Lam Rim, or the graduated path to enlightenment. So the nice thing about the Lam Rim, or the gradual path, is that if we think of scriptures that are not Lam Rim presentations, we might not necessarily know how they fit into the stages of spiritual practice or training the mind. If we're familiar with the Lam Rim, we'll have the basis to be able to place all of those teachings.
다 가시 들러르고 너와 저와도 마토키 다 차서나. 다 마고 맞으세네.
Ah?
말루사.
Marlusa,
마고 세 하시벨 요라.
yeah, 하고서.
제 노지더니 다 릴라고 요말 깔고 차게세요.
Candice Lagare,
저와도야.
Gilwataya, right?
마고 사데 마고 코 뒤쳐서 토고 요말 와스.
Oh, hagosan. Yeah, so it is said that actually if one receives many teachings, but is not able to use a system like the Lam Rim in order to put those teachings into practice, that one becomes like the leather from a bag of butter. So Geshe said, in old Tibet, the butter would be carried in a leather bag, and because that butter is always in the bag, no essence of the butter can seep into the leather anymore. It's like oversaturated. So one becomes like that.
다 로르게 된다 가르세요. 로르게 다센 저와도 마토나. 다 책은 놓고 돈다고 지네. 다 드니 릴라고 요 말이세요. 레스.
Younger than that?
책은 놓고 도.
Do.
책은 놓고 도 가디나 책은 데데 와르고 라고 차야 만디 와스. 가디나 trouble
Yeah. So the other analogy that's similar, which is used to illustrate this principle, is that if one cannot conceptualize all the teachings one has received in the framework of the Lam Rim, one is like a rock in a lake. So in other words, the rock is there in the lake, but because it is so hardened, it can't absorb any of the moisture of the water.
게만노리나 게기도 캠보도 다 게헤르지 다 시셰도 위가라 저거는 돈들이 말이야 시셰 뭐도야.
So in the monastery, the abbot and the geku, the disciplinarian, they often remind the monks of this. Since you are studying here, do not be like a rock in the lake. That is something that you'll often hear in the assembly.
다 대지배 년보래서 다 비거주 첨보야 년보래 근데 지에서 다 나로서 다 시시케도 다 예케도 강가 이네 부게 다 고서 그샤와 저와 또 되는 거 주고요.
So this is really important, and these reminders are important for both the listeners of the Dharma and the speaker of the Dharma, that whatever we are hearing, they should be used to examine and to tame, to transform the activities of body, speech, and mind.
다 뒤노는 가로서 강가 다 니까게 대시 다두게 대시 강가 저거야. 그래서 니까게 대시 이나요 다 보게 세고 노도 뉴런도야. 저 두자 파 좀아서야 뒤니 다 고추가로스.
So, of course, in terms of the goals of the Dharma, is to achieve all kinds of happiness, right? Both temporary and final or ultimate happiness. And so on the temporary level, right? So doing the body, speech, and mind, the benefit of that is that one has fewer namtok, false projections, false thinking, conceptualization. When one has fewer namtok, then the mind is going to be more still and relaxed. So that's the benefit here.
다 가로서 메고 통데 치ኞ다 류ኞ다 뭐 미다 고 갈레면도 와스. 다 두노 파스 로소나 강게 지요 와스. 다 데니 된 노지치.
Kare.
뭐 옛날에
Ale.
또 두자 옛날에 소와 두자로 파만도 하지. 너무다 토야지.
Yeah. So, also we have to be an active participant in the practice of, invested, or like, how would I say that? Invested, or like an active participant in the practice of the Dharma. So Geshe said, it's easy, like, for example, with the news, to become desensitized. We see there are so many floods, right? We see there are so many hurricanes, tornadoes, problems of winds, problems of the element, but we're just like watching it from afar. So it doesn't move our mind. We have, to develop an awareness and a compassion, we have to think, what would it be like if I was experiencing that? This is the same sort of attitude we have to have towards the afflictions. 뉴몽당 칼ung 녀저든서 저 고마스나.
세는 예모노나 세판 로소나. 어느 예모티 강게 대학 다시 바라와스.
Ale. Ale nukindida, which ale, right. Sorry, so that's the type of the analogy. Sorry, they seemed unrelated. So the type of the analogy is that, just like when we're thinking about those disasters, what it would be like to really be inside that, we should also understand that when the afflictions arise within our mind, it is like a natural disaster that is arising in the environment. And that if we follow where the afflictions are leading us, it is like putting our mind in a disaster zone.
그래서 어다 간주 세가 뭐저 세대한테 저 그게 세가 세 여가도 누가 간지시 녀보시는데 어다 제모제와 누지 그게 다토 그게.
So when we talk about pointing out the nature of the mind, right? Part of that instruction could be a very practical application. Being aware of the wholesome and unwholesome thoughts that are arising in our mind, experimenting with different antidotes, and just like a game, watching the play of the mind and seeing what works best. So the Geshe said the kung. So a kung is a Tibetan word meaning a valid source for a particular teaching. So the kung for this teaching is His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, who says that, someone asked him if he liked watching football or something like that, which the rest of the world knows as football, and in Canada and the US we call soccer for some reason. But anyways, so he asked His Holiness if he liked watching that, and His Holiness said, not really, I prefer to watch the play of the mind. And this is really important, right? And these antidotes are really important because we see with the people of the world that mental problems, mental health is getting worse and worse. This is really something that is a trouble. So the danger is, right, we don't challenge going in the directions of the afflictions at all. So you have many people that start out like as pretty fine, or they're facing no more problems than the average person. But the mind becomes extremely disturbed. How does this happen? They are sitting in their namtok, in their false projections. They are never trying to question those projections and assumptions. And then, because of that, the afflictions come up. They're unable, or they don't cultivate the antidotes to the afflictions. Therefore, their mind becomes habituated to namtok, to false projection. It becomes habituated to afflictions, and this causes tremendous suffering. So related to that, it reminds of a story of one of the Baksal Lamas. So Baksal was it was a former prison actually in West Bengal where the Tibetans were first settled. So there was one particular monk who lived in a very, very terrible hut. It was like, out of all the poorly constructed huts, it was the worst one. And there was a time where there was an extremely heavy monsoon rain, like a terrible rainstorm. And so all the monks were worried about him, so they thought, oh, he must be in a terrible state. They went to check on him. Yeah. Right. So when they found him, he was lying in bed with many tin buckets around him, and the sound of the rain was kind of musical. So he was singing along with the sound of the rain. So if we know how to think about things, how to approach things in a different way, we can greatly reduce our suffering. Otherwise, like most of us in that sort of situation, we would think, oh, this house is so terrible, what's the next thing that's going to happen? Oh, it's so noisy, and so forth. But if we know how to think about things, we can challenge this. Niduk ale. So if he's remembering the story correctly, Geshe said, it's like this man was sitting with an umbrella covering his face and listening to the sound of all of these drops falling into the various buckets in his hut. And so this story, it became well known, and then one of the people who is doing long-term retreat in the mountains above Dharamsala, also those huts are not necessarily the greatest. He said when he was facing a similar problem, he sang along with the sound of the rain, and he found this very beneficial for his mind. So these examples are also advice, right? An example is good if it can be used as advice that is relevant to us. So hopefully this is that kind of advice. So for most of us, it might be a little bit of a different situation. We might have a neighbor across the street, and we see all of these cars pulling up late at night for a party. What does the mind immediately do? The mind immediately folds in, thinks, oh no, how many people are there? How loud is this going to be? What time is the party going to finish? And maybe even before the noise starts, one has already become very disturbed. So how does a skilled practitioner face such a situation? Well, the skilled practitioner can meditate on the characteristics of the sound. Is it permanent or not? Right? How is the sound arising? What is the cause from which the sound is arising, is manifesting as a result? What does that tell us about causality? So this is one way for a skilled practitioner to deal with the irritation of noise. And, it can be broader too. Other skilled meditators, whatever the distraction is, they see that as sort of a measure to see how firm, how stable their practice and concentration is. So it's a valuable way to measure their progress. So just identifying these projections and these afflictions is really important. Just if you were to look in the mirror and you were to see like a big glob of mud or something on your face or food, you would immediately want to wash it off. This should be our approach to false thinking and to the afflictions. Yeah. So as much as possible, right, we want to start practicing like that. So let us begin by placing the body and mind in a relaxed state. So think that the mind is like a sky, and whatever discursive thoughts, unpleasant thoughts, feelings, distractions are there, they are like clouds, and we blow those clouds away with the gentle wind of calm. Think in this way, the sky is empty of clouds. It is clear, vast, luminous. So think the nature of the mind, its fundamental nature, is pure luminosity, unobstructed, unencumbered. If tapped into, this can become the cause of tremendous happiness.
Se jachishukadi ina ngado ngai nye juju se de amayimba. Zomboli pa gwashini na jachimbochi tagi somachi.
So on the basis of this calm, let's take this narrow-minded attitude that is obsessed with only our own concerns or with the concerns of ourselves and those close to us. And based on this vastness, let us bring forth a mind that embraces the world.
Mechiba, dewan deba chiba, dunga gomeba, chiba yina yota, makashi saya tuya, oda desa kari yina yota pa, ha levi kange chimonolota mogotuyanduas.
So think how every one of these beings that we're embracing shares the same basic wish to be free of suffering, to have stable happiness. And think about the situation of this world. Those waking up every day, wondering if they'll have enough food, wondering if there'll be clean or safe water to drink, facing those kind of really serious problems.
Tandile pa jachimbo tawa yina, miga tunsal tawa yina, yoro soso tapa yosate layin rabo. O da layin rushin rabo, ngene kibore de arte moshiba, tembozo yi somachi.
So as we look around at those in these kind of situations, if we consider our own situation, having all of the basic things that we need to be able to study and practice the Dharma, it's like we're a deva, it's like we're living in a god realm compared to those who are just struggling to survive.
Tandri ta, de za chimbo, koka za chimbo de chula matone runjin yuzu, porque deshi shula pa chito ba chita zo yi sombakachi.
I don't want to waste the opportunity, the precious opportunity provided by this form. I want to be able to use it to achieve a state where I can lead all of these beings that are suffering to a lasting and meaningful happiness.
Tandri somba nujin yongwa chita, so wa zechi de taga yo ta, shinji laro chis.
In order for this to come about, with a single-pointed mind of faith, I will make a request for the blessings of the holy beings. Geshe's like, did you lose the prayer book? No, I really can't see anything without my glasses these days. All right, so let us begin the prayers. Temba jom den de jin je ba dra jom ba yan da ba zo be sang ye je ba dang shab su dem ba de war she ba je den kem ba ke bu du ve ka lo gyur wa la na me ba la da mi nam gi temba
Shakyatu Bala Chazelo Chede Gyabsu Jiho Tenba Chondende Dijin Sheba Drajomba Yandaba Zobe Sangye Sheba Dang Shabsu Demba Dewa Sheba Jiden Chemba Chebu Dewe Kalo Jorwa Lana Meba Ladam Minamgi Tenba Sangye Chomdende Pejawa Shakya Tubala Chaselo Chede Kyabsu Jiho Tenba Chondende Dijin Sheba Drachomba Yandaba Zobe Sangye Sheba Dang Shabsu Demba Dewa Sheba Jiden Chemba Chebu Dewe Kalo Jorwa Lana Meba Ladam Minamgi Tenba Sangye Chomdende Pejawa Shakya Tubala Chaselo Chede Kyabsu Jiho Saji Beki Chushi Meto Chan Rirab Linjin Nide Gyambade Sangye Jindu Mide Bowagi Jogo Nanda Jinla Jeba Shoyi Dam Guru Ratna Mendala Kam Niryata Yami Refuge and Bodhicitta. Chedan Sogi Chenam La Jangchu Bardu Dani Kyausu Ji Dagi Chenyen Gibe Sunam Gi Drola Benji Sangi Droba Sho Chedan Sogi Chenam La Jangchu Bardu Dani Kyausu Ji Dagi Chenyen Gibe Sunam Gi Drola Benji Sangi Droba Sho Chedan Sogi Chenam Lai Jangchu Bardu Dani Gyatso Che Dagi Chenyen Gibe Sunam Gi Drola Penjir Sangi Droba Sho.
So everyone, I'm just going to turn the sound for musicians off since I have to get up anyway because there's a notification blocking all of your lovely faces. So just give me a moment and we'll get started. There we go. That should just improve the sound a little bit. Okay.
This way.
Oh, this one.
Oh, yeah, that Nanzo Kadi, you know, that Gawa typical, that is it to do in a Rimbo, you know, that young in views, because it to the Tsons with the Halevi catching with Sares.
So whenever we engage in virtue, when we engage in what is meritorious, then it's always worth mentioning, it's always important to pay attention to the activities being complete in the beginning, the middle, and the end.
Oh, 당연히 make siwo 통고 was 거의 녀다 춘주 인들의 챔버 인들의 뭐 siwo 통야 뭐 요아레스 파리워시 잘로 뭐시 그 말레스.
So in terms of reflecting on the problems of samsara, with the state of our world as it is, we don't have to look far, you know, we don't have to look far before we see all types of problems, both big and small.
다 대지 강가요. 더는 뭐게 샤와가 쇼라 종행지서 총아 다파 할레비다. 대용터는
So how do all of those problems, big and small, arise? Where do they come from? These problems are all the results of the causes of non-virtue, of the causes of what is unwholesome. Because sentient beings have accumulated all of these unwholesome causes, these negative results manifest. And you know, think about all of the sentient beings who are accumulating those causes. This is why you have seemingly big problems, but they accumulate those causes because of unknowingness, right? So they are truly worthy of compassion.
다 나로서 다 롱제 유주 보게 대신 인의 지체하게 내봐요. 이따 가서 더더 용연 주스 총아 대용 댐보 자치모 som도 같이 뭐 이랬어.
So, because we want real happiness for ourselves and others, we have to make sure that the causes of the happiness that we cultivate are complete in the beginning, middle, and the end if we want a great result in the positive sense.
다 근데 그만 보게 여러 베비칼 수송아스 다 그마시고 동바를 지가 다 너쇼라 사회 앞에 다자에 다 디수 전에 리버마 반다고 친구 죽은도 왔어.
Oreti, lama yeshidang lama kaluro.
다 대담을 하십니다.
Shedan.
ngamatel magas
Ale, listen.
ngamashi tombar jigo ta sabe yabo ta jaye de jigo decision me banda ko jigo yares.
So His Holiness the Dalai Lama, in a teaching in France, he reflected how the strength of the Dharma in that country, and really, in many ways, it is a country, a Western country, where the Dharma is really flourishing. This is due to the kindness of all of the lamas, not just the great teachers, but of all of the lamas who really work to establish the teachings there.
오다 든지래 사다 오로 소식가리는 가제트도 사회 여보 다야 단지고 여보 돼야 달려가 제가 옛날 우리 강갈 다 롬에 바다 배운 거 알았어.
So this shows us that nothing is wasted, even if our efforts seem small, right? The small seeds that are planted now of those wholesome qualities and intentions, these can actually lead to a very great result for a great number of people later on.
오다 든지바지 다 녀령년도 다 돈요게세 가제 다 렐레지시다니.
So we're going to begin this contemplation with trying to establish some equanimity within our mind.
오다 리데와도 세시와 가제 다 렐레데야지.
So just start by trying to the best of your ability, placing the body and the mind in a relaxed and peaceful state.
류츠마차는 세츠마차 그래. 세츠마차는 다 자도 좌도 가르 이나다 강가 샤와지도 다 여보치는 그래. 손바지.
When the inner winds are calm and peaceful, the mind is peaceful and subdued. When the mind is peaceful and subdued, all of the elements, the components of the body are in equilibrium and are also calm and subdued.
셀 미엔다고 예고요 메바 코로가 중지 코론 걸 발레레 지내자바이나 아달류마테 세세기 야레 어떤 걸 대바이나 할레레시도 쇼와 덴덴투 소바도
So if we take gondat mikyu karere,
이 메바제
chikyang mepai.
셀 쇼와 헬레 대바이나
So if we empty our mind of thoughts without trying to hold a particular object of focus, then the busyness of the mind is subdued. The mind can become calm and relaxed. So let us do that.
어다 니가 쇼와요 바이나 대존지 야진조 메아이자 다 던지가 40% 수바던다와 노카던다와 다 세그 중지 코로 야치엠보 그유바디 디네다 400% 수바시 다위 손바지.
But because emptying the mind of thoughts only leads to a temporary, fleeting peace, we know that that practice by itself is not enough. Taking the vastness, the luminosity of this mind is our starting point. We want to be able to plant seeds of what is meaningful, of what is wholesome within the soil of that mind.
대요 좀마 땜버려야 체터 윤중의 테마 거제치 팔레레 지니.
So to really develop that focus, to prepare the field of the mind, we'll count the inhalations and exhalations to a count of 9. So breathing in, aware of breathing in, breathing out, aware of breathing out.
전부 시스템에 대해서 건 레레지는 봐둬야지.
So then just do one deep exhalation and then just appreciate the stillness of the mind.
리세 셔와 세 주마다 레레 나는 만다가 다 보여 서바지.
Think the mind is calm, clear, and peaceful, different than before.
보다 사회 야수 다 야수 지에텔다 루제 용조 대완대바 녀바 링어문대바 녀바 다 지바이 서바지.
And so to plant the seed in our mind, let us begin with a contemplation of equanimity, thinking all beings are essentially the same in wishing for happiness and wishing for freedom from suffering.
타베리 조지 셈베리 손지거리 다 여바데요 다 지바치 주의 강가 자침분이 서바지.
All sentient beings are essentially the same from the perspective of possessing the potential to reach the bliss of liberation, possessing the potential to traverse the bodhisattva path, possessing the Buddha nature, the potential to achieve enlightenment. All beings share this.
대존도 맞이 다 신지 여와메바 슬다와 이나요 로소소가 쇼지 셈베에 대 강가 용사 손지가 예대 강가 다 리오 여보 강가 사가 다 시인다고 어다 던지가 자침부 예주주 손바지.
And think that this mind that sees oneself and others, indeed all sentient beings without exception, as worthy, this mind of closeness to all sentient beings, this is the seed which makes it possible to develop the bodhisattva practice. This is the seed which helps us bring forth our positive mental qualities. This is the seed which can sprout and flourish into complete and perfect Buddhahood.
예 내설 던지지 이거는 임바이자 어느 롱도 롱게 녀지보 어느 대와 태야 어느 어다 예 강가 리트마테 다 되는지 뭐도 되는 지금이 손바지.
Because of the reality of this situation, then it would be unsuitable for me to only help the people that I like, the people that are close to me, reach happiness, and to disregard the same need for happiness of all of those other sentient beings.
강에 유주세야 네 다디고 니까도 다디고 대시 강가 되어 그치다 당이 손지고 공부 더 봐서 이 손배 돈이 다 줘주세요.
Bring forth the mind thinking to best help all of those sentient beings reach their potential for temporary and ultimate happiness. I must achieve the state of complete and perfect Buddhahood to most effectively help them. Bring forth bodhicitta.
뭐야 되겠지.
So we'll pause there.
다시
뒤에서
뒤에만 되고 이거서 또 뒤에만 돼 같이.
Doing Dukarin's DJ Wujane Konso Kogyo Marewa. So Geshe was asking why I didn't hit the gong. I can hit it for Geshe, but yeah, because I turned the sound of musicians off, just so you can't hear the fan, I think you won't be able to hear the gong.
뭐야 다 끊는 데요 반 누지래 다 알아서 나가서 돼. 띵이네 보게 토자 pita bochil mandona ta te puso soba do mato ta si was.
So, you know, it's really clear if we reflect on the motivation that we just brought forth, that if we are not kind of successful in helping the I, that we call the I, that we call the self, to actualize complete and perfect Buddhahood, we will not be able to help all of those beings really effectively in the way we want to.
오다 tindijil male pad yeg tenda to pad jo rong tenda ta kaze mugi kaze leka cheba ta do thoyo mare sigares.
And you know, that's from the perspective of others. We won't be able to help them in the way we want. But, you know, until one is able to reach that ultimate goal of perfect Buddhahood, even one's own welfare will not be completely established. One's own purpose won't be.
오다 tindivache rindis was tani ta khachunga zu zume yeg nes ta nge cheba jendiwa. Zume jeba telen de shi mem ji xianche san no ji me ta yares.
Right. So nga chatsama login tigiro. So
So
Geshe said last time we had the list of the 4 realms. So I just said to Geshe, I'm going to read those out for you first. So it's Namka Taye, limitless space, Namshe Taye, limitless consciousness, Chiyang Mepa, nothing whatsoever, and Yumin Memin, neither presence nor absence. The neither presence nor absence is sometimes given as Sipe Tsemo, the peak of existence. So Geshe wants to turn your attention to number 4, and the name of this realm, Yumin Memin, neither presence nor absence.
this one oda the shi me se ten the shi rapa kanga oda the shi yo sari kare chena ko no to chile ngo te is a kanga pa yawi sa ten the shi rapa me ba.
Right. So the first thing is Ye Min is meaning like it is something that the me, the absence here means an absence of Dusherwa, discrimination. So, you know, you have within the 5 skandhas form, feeling, discrimination. So what the absence is here is it's an absence of discrimination.
This one oda the shi me ba mo sa te ni ne tsul pe de me ba mare kare se isa kadi na the shi ji jalo le yo.
So it says neither presence nor absence, Geshe is explaining. So if it's like it's absent, but younger son.
Ah, pe de shi me ba mare was ni ne sala.
Yeah.
Se isa.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. So the reason that it's phrased neither presence nor absence is that we can't say it's completely absent. Why is that the case? Because as long as there is a mind, there will be some level of discrimination that is happening. And here we don't mean discrimination in the political sense, right? We mean a mind that is distinguishing between things.
Ta te dil me ta nga zu tanda dil ta lila wo so no to ya ra was lila wo ma da deva la te ji kanga thoya ya es chene do to se te ji kanga.
And the other thing Geshe said is, you know, we talked about these 4 formless realms and the meditations that lead those as they're still within samsara. But Geshe said, you know, don't dismiss them then as like a low or an easy practice, because actually through these 4 formless meditations, one can achieve shine, calm abiding, and, you know, very important levels of concentration.
No ji nga zu shene go yo se gen do as shene ngene to ge dil devi se kanga ju to ya mare.
So, you know, we always say achieving shine, achieving calm abiding, right? So-and-so has achieved calm abiding. Well, the first thing to know is that if someone's really achieved calm abiding, that can't be done with a desire realm mind. To achieve calm abiding, that has to happen at minimum using a mind of the form realm, sukam, right? And so remember, we spoke about, you know, during the time of the Buddha, before he was preaching the doctrine, there were many spiritual systems where people would think about the faults of the desire realm and cultivate meditations to reach the form and the formless realm minds, to bring forth those minds.
다 대지 토바 이나 이네 포게 tumbanin 거 소하지 만로나 패도 매바데 가져라야 되래. 스제가 녀래 최초의 토비 라마지
Right.
짜리보 짜리보 전에 한 레비 다 시드노지. 짜르지 찌찌 산이 되니까 거대 바트리가 하네 오노도 레비도
But no matter what a high level of form or formless realm meditation one is going to contemplate, it's not going to be enough to help you achieve liberation, right? It can only take you to the peak of existence, which is the other name for neither presence nor absence, number 4. So the story that illustrates that in the Lam Rim is of the yogi with those huge long dreadlocks, right? And they were touching the floor, and he was in meditation for many years, reached a very high state of samadhi, but then some rats began crawling up his hair and nibbling at it, and he became very upset, right, and was disturbed from his concentration.
강가도 말해 되는 리지를 다 드리는 거 알아.
So that's sutmekam gongen chasama marero.
야 자동
Yeah.
말다.
So that's not true for all of the formless absorption meditators, right, that they would have that experience, but that is going to be the experience of some.
어다 못 와서 되는 다 노도 뉴르도야 다세 좋아도 저 뉴르도야 단다 되지 단 이내 배도야 알아스.
Yeah. So then in terms of kind of regulating difficult feelings and thoughts, 건다 카레팽기래?
좋아도 저 뉴르도야도 다네 노도 저
I like this,
뉴르도야
right? And also reducing false thinking, reducing the projecting mind. These can be very effective remedies for those.
다 쪼쪼지 되는 단도 때에서 세레와 자치뭐 세 자치는 좀벌을 따와이나 소소 끼고 힘이 좋아지 가디나 다 요바지 그요 알아스.
But along with that, Geshe thinks an awareness of the world, a vast mind, contemplating the difficult situations of so many of our fellow sentient beings, and then seeing how our circumstances are relatively good. That's a good practice to have in place as well.
끼고 망고 마시네 되네 소소 노도 나 뭐라 뭐 쏘아서나 다 뒤에서 강에 저요 알아스.
So the problem is, right, that if despite the good situation, like we don't sort of challenge these projecting thoughts, we allow whatever is arising to arise in our mind, and that will make things difficult.
단계 시제와 된 때도 정보야 시제색인도 왔어. 거의 담아 시제.
Yes.
나도 코아텔 시바색이요 시바.
Right. So then we looked at the second name of the fourth of the 4 formless realms. So we said the first name is neither presence nor absence. It can also be called the peak of existence. So the Tibetan word for existence is sipa. And Geshe is just saying that the etymology, I say it wrong, either entomology or etymology. Someone emailed me about this. Ngodrup still isn't clear of which one to say when. Apologies. I'm going to say etymology, hoping that's right. Okay, thank you, Dave. So the etymology of the word is very important to understand. Sipa.
고지 첨보요 알세요 알아. 스케바수 시바세나 다스 아니 다가세 데다바 이는 코알라. 대화지 용어시그래 등화지 용어시그래 되는 코템보 말이 가디나 좋아로 그래.
So this word sipa is almost like, I would say, as the English word possibly. So what can we understand about using the word sipa, the Tibetan for existence, as another word for samsara or cyclic existence? The sipa means possibly. Possibly happiness could come, but also possibly suffering could come. As long as we're in samsara, we're going to be dealing with that sipa. Anything could happen in samsara. Anything is possible. So don't grasp too tightly to your current situation. So, understanding that because they're full of possibilities, nothing is stable, seeing that there's no essence within samsara, then we start to train our mind, right, to seek those solutions beyond samsara. So that is a very powerful thing, right? We have the freedom to work towards all of these things, and we also have all of the tools within our hand to begin to cultivate, to train our minds.
바디 다와트 비 단다 롱요 비티세 레다 아스는 무슨 라자들이 야긴 좋았어.
Chandrakirti reminds us in his text that now is the time that you do possess freedom. So now is the time to do something.
대세야 레도 녀물 롱요 세요 말레스 가르 바이나 더 도야가 다 롱요.
So Chandrakirti is not saying that we're free from karma and affliction, right? We know that we're bound from that. But what he's saying is that with our current circumstances in rebirth, we can do something about working towards that freedom.
고세 롱 주지 터니 바 아스 오만 주베가 노요 아레스.
Gongxing Dapochi?
단다 람 기다스 오만 주바 노요 아레스. 대비 라시 오만 주바 노.
Oh, right. So Geshe is saying that this is found in the text of Madhyamakavattara. Chikyankomason Siklila Polavna Digidua.
세 고세 롱 주지 터니 체 모버 터니 체 사서 나고 자면도.
Then it is
세는 고 단다 가르 제나 롱요 아레스 티데레다.
Right. So whatever we do, whatever we work towards, we have the freedom to do that.
다시 로가 모버 요 아레스 요 아레 모버 체.
Geshe is saying he thinks he gave me this verse. I'm not sure. He's saying to check the book. So because we have to go in stages, we are going to turn back to the text. So we are in the text of the Lam Rim. So where we are, so if you've got this text, the 14th Dalai Lama Stages of the Path, Volume 1, we are on page 96. Page 96.
오다티나 롤라 네바 치마오발라 멤버 지스 템발라 메 네텐데 녀스 렘발라 네 소와 디지셰발라 시버토멘디시 치치츠라 여리데 네빈디시 템바 숨바나 치오 선다시 이나요 오다 알리도 못텔라 좋아.
So following that, reliance on the 6 discernments was taught, thinking of oneself as a patient, the Dharma as a doctor, the teachings as medicine, earnest practice as the way to cure disease, the Tathagatas as holy beings, and wishing that the teachings remain for a long time.
오다 손진이 주테다 고상아비바다 다 고르르마 모모요라와스 강가치 마오발라 멤비 자보레디가레스.
So if we can think of these teachings, right, in this text as like a continuum of the Buddha as the original doctor, descending a spiritual lineage all the way to the composer of this text, the 5th Dalai Lama. These are all of the kind of doctors who were in the world. And so what they explain, the instructions that they give, those are the teachings, and that is the medicine that is going to cure us as the patient. And of course, we're not talking about primarily an external disease, but we're speaking about the inner disease of the afflictions. Yeah. So within the 4 Arya truths, or the 4 noble truths, right, we talk about one of those is true paths. We can think of those true paths as being the medicine, which is mentioned here. So true sufferings are like the disease that we are suffering from as the patients. And true origins are like the pathogen, right? Like the bacteria or the virus that is causing the disease. And then true cessations, that's when, related to number 4, is the way to cure the disease. That's when the disease has been cured. That's the state of being cured. Those would be true cessations. So earnest practice is the way to cure disease. This means continuous, right? Continuous, consistent practice is going to lead us eventually to a point where the afflictions are completely cleared away. And that's what we mean by cured. Again,
맞아.
Yeah.
릴 만다 오지 레소나.
Yeah.
델라테네 셀 강에테 리도 셀 강에테 야 이자 코네레 잘라가 봐서.
So what we speak about like a disease or an illness, so we can think of a disease or an illness as something that causes like discomfort or pain. So Geshe's pointing, he said, if we have like some sort of sore or bruise on our body, that's like the source of pain. So that's the illness in this sense.
다 지바레 데아레스 컨트롤 이나레 나자레 저도 셀 레소나. 디크테 강에테 타제로.
And isn't that true that when we get angry, that when we get jealous, that when we experience those afflictions, we experience discomfort, we experience suffering. So in this way, they are like diseases.
다 디금 맹에는 두는 제시자 데아테르 맹에네레 데아레스.
So, the explanation, which is going to help us to heal from those afflictions, that is a true and worthy medicine.
대지시에발라 시부터 민드시 치템바보다 손진이 다른 고상가발라 소바다 뭐야라 와스 강갈레 때는 시부터 민드시 야토나 다른 치텔 바이 치템볼레기야레스.
So the Tathagatas as holy beings, just explaining here that, seeing those who preach the Dharma as being holy beings, so starting with the Buddha, and we could think all the way down to the great fifth Dalai Lama, the composer of these texts, seeing them as holy beings, the purpose of this practice is that it's going to give us confidence in the instructions. It's going to give us the confidence to practice the instructions.
치지츠 예리드네 빈드시 치지츠 당하로서 로주던 드리시에발라 때네 치근에서 다프게 센지 유돌 편바데바 이링볼 데그레 소바치.
And wishing the teachings remain for a long time. So by hoping that our small contribution in the way of our practice, this contributes to the longevity and to the presence of the teachings, for the reason that if the teachings are able to be stable and around for a long time, this is going to benefit many different sentient beings.
소지게 때바 가제 지여다 지바이나 어느 센지게 대실 대세세 배도 요하르 생간존노지 대세게 요하르 왔어.
So the more that the Dharma sort of flourishes and spreads, the more opportunity sentient beings will have for finding happiness. This is how we look at it. Yes, right. So just to conceptualize these teachings, right, in terms of the Lam Rim, so the previous topic was the 3 faults of the pot and how to abandon those. And so the next main kind of outline is the 6 discernments, which we just went over. So these are going to help us to really kind of bolster our practices of hearing, contemplation, and meditation, which are, of course, essential to our steadfast practice of meditation. So for those of you who are who have the text, and I'm not sure if it's available in a PDF from Wisdom. If it is, it's usually quite affordable. Geshe is just explaining that, it's nice to know where the 5th Dalai Lama stops and where the great 14th Dalai Lama begins. So the way that the text is organized is everything you see in bold, these are the words of the great 5th Dalai Lama, and everything that is not in bold, these are the glosses of His Holiness, the 14th Dalai Lama. So we're now beginning again with a gloss, the 14th Dalai Lama's comment.
대두게 게디고 오도 만원와 땜비 체이라 로레노네 전데 게쇼니 니제동 대바공바타 류종 제세제 리바케 미파테바 소체 탈로 데메 네테 여도 베바네나 레르 니지타베 somba 지라 샤와마도 제 참모시게 먹음.
Yes. So all beings without exception want happiness and do not want suffering. The purpose of Dharma is to correctly show how to adopt virtue and discard non-virtue, the causes of happiness and suffering. If we ourselves are able to seriously endeavor in multiple approaches to meditate on, for example, virtues such as compassion and faith through citing scripture, stating logical reasonings, and using concentration, only then will we be able to generate attitudes like like compassion. Such attitudes do not arise through minor conditions, unlike anger, pride, jealousy, etc., that do not require effort to bring about and need only the slightest of conditions like wood fire that burst into flames upon adding some petrol.
어다 대신 있는 데와 요케지 이나 숑바도 니제사 데 코타 제도 제 텔은 투투도 다 춘추지가라 때는 더 말해 이니 먼저 제 고통 주고도 다 걸어보게 이바 몸보게 돈이 들어가.
So these positive mental qualities, such as love and compassion, these are not something that can arise kind of willy-nilly through just cultivating a few slight causes, right? To bring forth, a stable love, compassion, and so forth. This is really going to require hearing, contemplation, and meditation, and specifically engaging in both analytical and placement meditation.
어다 때 제세 시월와 실로 컨트롤도 내쳐도 나자들 질레 딜로 코 제세 몸보게 돈이 릴라고 치는 코프게 네.
And it's just causes and conditions, right? Anger, attachment, pride, jealousy, because of the force of habituation and the many causes that our circumstances give for the arising of these. They arise very naturally and incessantly.
더때 대질이 라고치는 거야. 코 사바마르 님바라와. 용용 샤와 다 용용 고차와 이자 코 릴라고치.
So why do those afflictions arise so easily? Again, it's the force of habituation, because they're just like attachment, jealousy, anger, and so forth. They're just arising again and again and again and again and again. Due to the force of habituation, it only takes a little thing for them to come forth very strongly.
다 숑바도 니지가 쇼로 다 단다데 노지데 테스테도 가서 콤바텐데 셰요라 와스. 다 이나요 코템보스 지메아이사. So
love and compassion, we may have a little bit of familiarity, at least with those practices, but because we have not maintained a stable practice over a long time, we have not yet been able to put in place that habituation, which would allow them to rise more easily and consistently.
Tele dote control don de cha ngaja thoto la so ba mece magi balisi wo yung dua je chunga shila tene jo lonso nganga shushu ji za do shi combo ane combo la meche bar sanu luna yamata dan bawa do tsuba je de tonchi se zhe ba de la tene desoin
Adi ngadi Lobsang yin chita. So tadi gitu ra.
Dore mashe ba do ta mashe ba do shega na chala so rong cha yi dunga na ge deje na nyemo no yembi toso.
The ngatso di akandes la gore sem kibo mepa dang gawe dang dinso dilo sarwa.
Nyemo no yembi.
Right. So Geshe, I'm sorry, I jumped ahead of Geshe. So that example of the wood fire burst into flames, he hadn't read that yet, but I've read that, so we won't read it again. So now we come to the next sentence. Thus, that which leads to unhappiness, misfortune, birth, aging, sickness, and death, a variety of dependent sufferings, are the afflictions.
Di jianji roje tata pun shawa gongshi sheba la tene lenge saba te duye senju tseme nyamo no nonge dawa tatu ngoma yamba shigi batong.
Right, so Geshe said, mark each one as he goes. That's what I'm doing now. They cause us to engage in actions that ruin ourselves and others, whereby we accumulate negative karma. Since this is the case, we must understand that afflictions, as exemplified by the three poisons, are ultimately the real enemy within us. And Geshe pauses there. Yeah. So, if we think about the power of those afflictions, right? If we think of all the wars that are being fought, and sometimes the people fighting in those wars, even taking joy or glee in the fighting and so forth, understanding that this arises due to their habituation, but also that because of that, they're accumulating so many causes of terrible future suffering. So, they're thinking that it's like these are the outer enemies, and defeating them are going to solve their problems, without understanding that the real enemy is the internal one of the afflictions. Huh?
세제 먹었어야 되게.
Oh, loso. Yeah. Like baju dan this
Oh.
kalasai. Okay, right.
근데 라마 첨보치다 버게 소라시. 아니 뭔가 버터 첨보요 아이서 고초초로 버게 따간로 근데 왔어. 그 레크는 끝이 당해 로마르드니 마조로스. 저로스 가제 저는 갈 강에 모아 지금 되었어.
야보코마son kene.
저로스 세제 가제 세바이나. 갈 강에 누가 모아 준 거도
Sula.
라마테.
Karishene.
그 그러고 로마르 와 인데 내가 제게 되지.
아, 네.
그런 거 티사로 와디 롤.
Okay. Sorry, just want to clarify a story. Goni.
Okay,
Yabokomason. Amjok dromason.
야고는 거 말라마치 요아레
Lost
세제 강가세 되겠지.
Right. Hagoson.
마치 피기도 왔어.
Yeah, macho ale. Yeah.
그걸 로마 뭐 보여라 왔어.
Loso.
다 그걸 돈이 셔와시만 예술 시에서 왔어.
Okay, yeah.
예술가 누가 추추치 뭐 요리 다 로마를 지금 현재 가야세. 그걸 강에 모아 준 거요.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so this is Mogayana Dichasan with Honson, right?
세계로.
Okay, so this is a story. This is a story of a false teacher. No, it was marcha, this word, the red offering that I confused, but I understand. So the marcha is a red offering, which means the offering of killing sentient beings as a religious practice. I mean, we see this in many parts of the world. So Geshe said that anyways, there was this Lama who was teaching this doctrine that you should kill and offer sentient beings as part of their practice. And he passed away and was born in one of the most suffering realms of existence. But his students, because he had taught them to make these kind of offerings, they continued to kill animals and make that as an offering. As they continued to do that, because he was the one who had taught them that practice, the causes of his suffering increased and his torment increased. So Mogayana, seeing him there, he talked to him and he brought this message to his students: please stop killing sentient beings, because when you do so, it increases my suffering.
뭔가 버데 오리바 가리나 고마 중보 카티 카라카디라 되게지사 콜데 야렌로 야렌스는 노서 콜로티스 라간로스 와스
Ale, kapugen is olunga.
그래서 그만 것이 바래도 라마데
Yeah.
사자도 강가 하고 그러와
Los.
그것도니 옛날 깨지 가가 맞고 그 라간로스 와스 뭐 중보 해도
Yeah.
와 레비시 마시치니다
The Shamapua Sosolama Kanga Tigitilam.
요
So the story goes actually that Mudgalyayana, right, he was the foremost in miracle powers of the Buddha's disciples. He had this clairvoyance, but he was also very plain spoken, right, like very direct. So when he had seen this in that hell realm, he immediately went to those disciples as requested and said, everything that your Lama taught you was wrong. You're like causing him suffering whenever you engage in these religious practices. Their immediate reaction was that they became extremely angry and they actually beat Modgalyayana terribly. Modgalyayana, luckily he didn't die, but he was beaten so terribly that he wasn't able to get up to walk back home. He had to be carried by some of the Buddha's other students. So in Geshe-la's mind, he's saying that, that Lama who was teaching the students to make the red offerings as a religious practice, he's sorry to say that he can't see those politicians in power who force and compel soldiers to go to war and to kill. He doesn't really see much of a difference. And when you think about the scope of the wars that are being fought sometimes, it's actually even more serious than those offerings of killing animals, because so many beings are affected for such a long time. So operating behind all of these mistaken behaviors is ignorance, right? It's really clear to see that. Nanglola drading
Rore tati ne to ne nyemo bi ji ne de di zene chabi ungo ne basa me ba yu to ma ta ji sa so ne bi nyemo bi chu ne ji samba shi de che ba de rola ne ba ta bin de shi gi ba su.
Although they should be crushed as soon as they arise. So that's talking about the afflictions. Our current situation is that we are heavily weighed down by the afflictions. And due to this strong oppression, we are at a point where, unable to rise up, we can barely catch a breath. Thus, because we are gripped by this chronic disease of afflictions, it is said we should maintain the discernment of ourselves as the patient.
니네 지는 뒤에서라서 봐 시마탄에 파츠마조게 하길 니네 존을 레가테래. 니나 인가조 단다 대서 도금은 와스.
Candice,
뒤에서라서 봐 녀모.
re, le padiga.
레 파드가 니네 존을 좀 메바조게 하더래.
Right. So actually, this is the ideal. When the afflictions such as the three poisons arise, we want to immediately kind of cultivate the antidote and crush them. But of course, that might not be possible right away. We have to build up to that.
다 이나요 단단 간조 알레전에 다 벌을 뛰는 롱거 베게 레 동보와 있다 저 도금은 와스 빼나. 예.
Los.
냐예. 냐즈 그거 냐즈와 노지데 되어레스. 무슨 단단 녀모치.
Los.
어때 이자다 단단 알레론라 네바타 민드시데.
So, as beginners, we might not be at this point where we can crush the affliction as soon as it arises. Geshe said, if you think about a fisherman, we're like fish that are still not able to distinguish bait. So the first step towards building to a point where we can recognize and dispel them as soon as they arise is seeing ourselves as a patient, as someone who is sick with this illness of the afflictions.
당연히는 판여모 냐즈와 노징한 저 토야 레와지다리아레스 단다치 냐즈와 노지데야레.
Yeah, so he said ideally we should be like if we see we want it to be so that the fish are like the afflictions that we can catch and stop from causing any problems. But at this moment, actually, the afflictions are like the fisherman or fisherwoman. They are the ones kind of controlling the narrative, and we are falling for the bait.
야 단디스와 너와 송지 비치는 녀무 비주네 되는 세와시비 녀보 탈로 돈바 메도 출라.
So, yeah.
That's good.
Yes.
녀무 세다지 맹과 처저 땜바 제바보는 멤바 캐파돈 다시.
So page 97, discernment of the instructions as medicine, the Buddha Dharma, is the supreme method that acts as an antidote to clear away the chronic disease of afflictions and thus is like medicine. Discernment of the Dharma instructor is a doctor. Someone who correctly gives instructions on the methods to clear away afflictions is like an adept doctor.
어디서와 내서와라 메사시 메미제시나 펜바마도 메라 샤자 체와피니 피 내리 모토와 따르 치시바 존지 녀무 먼저바 라데 레메 뇨알라 까네 네데 뇨서 로데 녀무베 네서와샤이 드신저 기바동.
We need to actually take the medicine and rely on medical treatment in order to improve. We do not recover from sickness through making offerings and prostrations to the medicine. In this way, merely understanding the Dharma does not destroy one's afflictions. One must emphasize practical experience and maintain the discernment of earnest practice as the way to cure the disease of the afflictions.
어다 몸보지는 다 드니치는 다가요 다 데데요 알아왔어 어다 자샤자 제와피 드니 다 드니치는 여보들 했더니 이나요 그 연락 zon지래 마도 쪼데 부에쪼 녀무 종와서 해 들어왔어.
So when we speak about earnest practice, of course, when we speak about practice, this is multifaceted. We make prostrations, we can engage in actions of offering, making praise, and so forth. But we should understand that those are only the branches. Especially in the context of earnest practice, here we should understand practice as mainly those things aimed at eradicating the afflictions.
어떤지와 디송아 디송이
그래서
단디송 다 손스 대용 디니마로와
nganso kebu tamba denso dejin shepa no senior right?
손스 대요 손스 대용게 대지셔발라 니 타바네 대동비 템바까지 제지 시고 동바임비 예대통에 대바 롱겐공게 셰데 대라 기빈드 진주스.
Through the power of that attitude, the faith that sees the Tathagatas as the ultimate teachers and their qualities as kind, holy beings naturally generates from the depths of one's heart, and respectful discernment, towards them arises.
대답이 템비 동바도 지스 템바 로리 마톤디 바다 수진 연바메 비고네 맹아 레베
Yeah, hakas.
do logic just the noye lami kati te to be toni chi just the tabarin the nina jo mari nyo bin the shiji roshu ji shawa shagi ba so do na chi nyen bi klong ke she so she she to ta ta sa ta ni semba chal.
Mhm. So, wishing that the teachings remain for a long time. The teachings and instructions from such a teacher up until our lifetimes have been passed down in an undegenerated continuum as an instruction lineage, like stones passed from hand to hand. Through remembering the Guru's kindness, one naturally generates the discernment of thinking how wonderful it would be if these Dharma teachings remained for a long time. In brief, bring to mind all the general and specific motivations, behaviors, and so forth related to listening to the Dharma.
Oh, that is not in settles.
Yeah. So Geshe said that he thinks this is a nice part to end, right? When we talk about related to listening to the Dharma and endeavor to listen. So we are going to pause. So for those of you new to the Lam Rim style of teachings, what's going to be really helpful is to remember the paths of the three scopes. Think about the paths of the three scopes as the basic structure. So we really need it in our mind, and as a beginner, we can train ourselves in listing those three basic outlines: the stages of the path common to beings of a lesser capacity, the stages of the path common to beings of a middling capacity, and the stages of the path of beings of a great capacity. So the stages of the path common to beings of a lesser capacity, these practices are what allow us to have a relatively good situation, a happy, spiritually conducive situation in samsara from lifetime to lifetime to lifetime. So to be able to have a good basis, in other words, like a good human body where we're born, be born in a good and conducive place and so forth, we can secure all that through these practices common to beings of a lesser capacity. So the stages of the path common to beings of a middling capacity, think just achieving a favorable situation within samsara is not enough. I need to be able to somehow reach an unchanging, stable happiness. A stable happiness that is completely parted from suffering. And then thinking just achieving that unchanging happiness for myself is not enough. This brings us to the stages of the path of beings of a great capacity, thinking that I must achieve a state where not only do I achieve happiness, but I'm also able to lead others, all sentient beings, to happiness. So the three stages of practice to reach the three stages of happiness, these are the three scopes of the three types of beings, according to the Lam Rim. So Geshe said that he thinks that there's still a little bit of Vajrasattva left, so he would just like to turn to that discussion for the few minutes. Just for those of you who are interested, I do have the sadhana translated into English. So I have completed that. I'm just having, Ngodrup is a faulted being, so I'm just having somebody look over it for me. So I will get this to you on Chokor Duchen. So on Wheel Turning Day, this sadhana will be available. So just explaining here that, some of you may be sort of newer to the Dharma teachings. And when you first hear about Tantra, there are some unusual things to that. So all he asks is don't allow a mind of dislike or denigration to arise related to Tantra. If you feel like I don't want to embark on Tantra right now, I'm just going to focus on Sutra for the time being, that's perfectly fine. That could even be the right thing, but don't dismiss Tantra outright.
다 손징인을 보게 내가 요렇게 제도 다 보게 그 기지에는 거 마로 다 마고바나 타메레 디아레스.
So as one becomes very advanced in their practice, then eventually to get to that final path to achieve full enlightenment, one has to embark on the practice of Tantra. It's not possible without any Tantra.
어떤 눈도 릴라본다 데도 릴라버로 와서 간저 디파중 야지 내서지 마도 매이자 거시라 뭐 당간도 되지 장도 요레스.
But Geshe said, especially with Vajrasattva, he thinks maybe this won't even be an issue for most folks, because in many ways it's just a skillful means to cleanse and purify karma.
가서 가서 로차 서든 로차를
Yeah. Sumdin so the Om A Hung Dang Lungak Yi Sum Chatsang Jotsare. Jitsasung. Oh, Jitsas.
된데
Oh, then Geshe Gatam.
근데 다 가와니.
Dene Kawanere Sena Nanso Chubapuya Tujiche, Omsara Tatagata Sapariwara Agam Pajam Pupe Dupe Aloke Gendi Nuide. Nachana.
오야 다 체크하는데.
Yeah, indicate do I.
알레 말아 됐어 그.
Agus.
다 차수 조차소나.
Mhm.
디바쇼에다 차수 조차소나 가서 간저 다시 배제 또 기나.
Mhm.
아니 도치바 강가로로 하고 살아와. 저는 뒤에서와
Los.
벤자 뭐 20번으로 니스시 20번 말 되듯이 다 되어지. 그래서 년 다시.
Oh, Damsikba then so love.
들어와.
All right. So, yeah. So we are now kind of coming towards the end of the practice. One has completed the visualizations of purification related to body, speech, and mind. So now we are in the section of the sadhana. So this
네, 다 발랐어.
so this sadhana, I want to say, like there's one sort of that I used to translate from as the basis, where the author had compiled the teachings from Pabongka Rinpoche and others specifically. But then I also took sections that Geshe highlighted from the Jenang ceremony itself, from the initiation ceremony itself, that he wanted to include within the sadhana. I believe it came from Lobsang Gyatso, but I'm not sure. So these two are kind of combined into the sadhana that we have here. So at this point, one wants the wisdom beings to depart to the natural abodes, and one wants the samaya, the commitment beings, to dissolve into oneself.
디잉엘은 제바소 아지는 거 알아. 제바소 게야 제체 가르래서나. 디잉엘 다니야.
Yeah.
디잉엘 가서 메자사토 진대냐라. 와 진대는데 제바소 아지 요아레 제바.
But Geshe said before requesting the field of accumulation depart and absorbing the commitment beings, there's a verse which is a request for patience. We ask Gonda Zuba. So why do we ask Vajrasattva to be patient with us after we've completed the mantra recitation? This is mostly connected with us having invited many of the various holy beings in the form of the commitment beings to partake in various offerings that we've set out and the making of various praises.
다 제바 피비깔라 아니 오소소 갈라라 되게 다 피비깔라 마기반다고 로야도 갈라 쯤마메바 차ян다고도 달라던데 어다 던지기냐 빠던데 돼지 제바지로지.
So it may be that the actual offerings that we set out, that some of those offerings were not of good quality. We may not have noticed that a piece of fruit was partly rotten or something like this, or there may be some other problems with the offerings. So one of the reasons we ask for patience is just to be able to purify any contamination in regards to the offerings. Yeah. So he thinks that's one of the main reasons that we ask Vajrasattva for his patience. Right. Right. So this is Keche. Yes. Keche. Hakusen. Then he keche kare? Ze, okay.
Ze.
Raza ze. Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Ane, ze chewa.
Yes.
Ane, wa chewa.
Ngakrwa. Yep.
아니 샤지 제와
Right. Loso.
나는 띵에서 제와
Right. And another thing that
아니 몸이 바고 대코나니 제와
right. Okay. So another thing too is that when we make the offerings are supposed to be endowed with certain characteristics. So Geshe is outlining, is the 5 characteristics of. He said, I already clarified with you last time. Sorry. Ngodrup's slow sometimes. So there are these 5 characteristics: the actual substance itself, the mantra that's recited to present it, the mudra, the concentration required, and the suchness aspect of the offering. So those 5 have to be in place.
그래서 어다 대지다 어다 양간도 제와 비비지 같이 뭐래서 다 제이 제와서는 제 거로보게 메토드 디베도 전이 내시가 로모도 지바요 알아왔어.
Yeah, so the substances may be like the water that we've set out. We may also have set out actual flowers, food, even make some sounds to present music and so forth. So those are the actual offerings.
니네지는 칠라비가 내시가도 아니 로모세레 타마타마지.
Right.
칠더니 말라 롤라레 마도 로모도 아니 타마칼라니 니네저는 요도레스.
So Geshe said that actually, like, we separate them out, but when we say food, music, and so forth, this is because actually, when you have a guest, the food and the music are supposed to be presented at the same time. So the food and the music are presented at the same time. We have to separate them out for practical reasons, but they should be at the same time. So you'll notice this, like, for example, at big events with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, they pass out the dresil. That's that sweet rice with the raisins and things. As His Holiness takes like the first bite of the dresil, they'll play the jaling, the kind of I guess like kind of like a what is it like? A clarinet. It's like a clarinet. So that's the music offering.
Yeah.
So the methods of the Buddha are, very skillful. He knows that, like, wealthy people, when they're enjoying their food, like if you go to an expensive restaurant, you also like to have a little bit of entertainment. So this is why the food and the music come together. So the other thing too was that we mentioned a little bit about the mudras. So video dirwa. So I put and Manoshi also was kind enough to send this out. So if you look at the newsletter from last night, you'll see the video of Geshe Sangpo from the FPMT Center in North Carolina. He's doing the mudras. So Geshe said that's like a really good video to watch. But anyways, he's going to give a quick demo here, but please watch that video. He said if you're interested in learning those mudras. So one of the kind of paradoxes here is that, like, we talk about the mudras being one of these 5 characteristics important, but at the same time, in our tradition, the mudras are supposed to be done sort of very subtly. You don't want to make a big show of the mudras, which can make it difficult to see. So a friend of Geshe who is very skilled in doing beautiful mudras, he went he was able to visit Tibet and went to, I guess, his local monastery, and during the rituals he was performing like these big beautiful mudras, but actually the result of that was that someone behind kept elbowing him, trying to get him to stop. Didn't think that was appropriate. Yes. Sorry. So this is kiriki. Okay. Yeah, so this is related, this ritual is a ritual related to Akshobhya, and Akshobhya is a, what is it? We have Kriya Tantra, it's a Yoga Tantra. And in the Yoga Tantra, there are many, many difficult mudras. So Geshe said he was maybe like a little bit proud of having learned those very nicely. Yeah. So, but in the beginning, especially, we want to be subtle and we want to keep the motions of the mudras at the heart level. So, Om Saura Tathagata Saparivara Agam, first water. Padyam, the second water, and that's foot washing water. And Geshe said it's water with flowers in it. We offer a beautiful water with flower petals in it to the feet. So it's like a ladle, Geshe was saying, a ladle going out. And the next one is pupe, the incense. So keep in mind, these are the Kriya action Tantra mudras. Dupe, the incense. Aloke. Aloke, the lamps. So Geshe said that he puts the two fingers like this because actually the in Kriya Tantra, one way to do it is just with the middle finger, but he thinks it's not so nice to do like that. So you can do like that, and many people do it. Gende, the scented water, the cologne water. And see, the other hand is like a plate upon which the hand applying the ointment. Yes. Nuede, the food. Shabda, the sound. Music. So the two waters, the actual offerings, music, and so forth. So Geshe said that was a very quick kind of crash course in the Kriya Tantra mudras. But if you're interested in learning this nicely, please do watch that video. So I've put it on Facebook, and Mano, she was also kind enough to include the link in the newsletter from last night. And then we have, after this, we have the Omvaja Murwa. We have the dissolving of the commitment beings into oneself, and then we have the concluding prayers and dedications. And a lot of these prayers are the same ones we do, like to be able to train, like the hero Mañjuśrī and Samantha Bhadra in virtue and so forth. So in this way, we've actually concluded the brief discussion of this sadhana of the solitary father Vajrasattva. So this helps us with the accumulation and purification, and remember that although they are branch practices, they are like the main branch practices. So very important to accumulate merit and purify obscurations. So maybe a story, but let us first dedicate the merits. And of course, as usual, if you must get on with your day, feel free. But if after the dedication you need to go, you have things to do, you can go. But also you're welcome to stay for questions. Changju semju rinpoche maje panam jeju rechi chewa nyamba meba yang gone gondu pewa shu tongni tawa rinpoche maje panam jeju rechi chewa nyamba meba yang gone gondu pewa sho jambe bao jidar kyampa tang kundu zambo deyan dejinde deda kungi jesu dalo chir gewa dida tamshe rabdungo dusun shebe gyawa tamshe gi ngowa gangla chodu ngapa de dagi gewe tsawa dikun kyang zambo jeji ratu ngowa gi
Kanri rawe kowe jingam di Begdan dewa malu jongwe ni Chenre sewan tenzin gyatso yi Shape si te pardu tengyo.
So we'll pause there. So let us take some questions maybe to get started. Does anyone have a question? 네, 건수 진달라 투제체. Yes, feel free to put up your hand, everybody. No, geez. Is everyone quiet, Dave, or am I missing someone?
Here comes Emily.
Oh,
Go
Emily.
ahead,
Okay.
Emily.
Yes, go ahead, Emily.
This isn't a question, but just a comment that I think the one finger version doesn't travel across cultures very well.
Yeah, I know that's Geshe's very aware of that.
It went viral.
Yeah. Yeah, so Geshe said, we accommodate and we can do it like 3 together or 2 together in a nice way. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think I see Sam.
Yeah, Sam, go ahead, Ed. Go ahead, Sam.
I have a question about the wisdom beings and the samaya beings. Yeah. Are the commitment beings specific to each deity? And the other part of the question is why the wisdom being comes in the form of a vajra. And why is the commitment being animate and the samaya being in form of an inanimate object?
Right. Okay. Yep, I gotcha. Then yeshe pa dang damsig pa kola re dua. Nganso di yeshe pa samsam nampa dorje dapo chiki re dua. Roa lagi nampa yomare dorje gi nampa re dua. Ane damsig pa konso lagi nampa re dua. Triwa tambo dire damsig pa yidam rejila tene nampa gyurwa drogi res, damsig pa kadine nampa chikpa dapo re bes. Yeah. Yesheba. Damsikpa. Yesheba. Yeah. Yeah. And Yesheba. Oh, so actually, so okay. Tapet goton song. Okay. Okay. Damsikpa kadiene girwa drogieres, yeshepa samsam girwa drogieres, samsam girwa drogiomares karisegitu. Ngasepo komason. Yeah. So the commitment being, right, its appearance, its aspect is usually going to change depending on what the particular yidam of the practice you're doing is. So the commitment beings will have a different form for Tara, they'll have a different form for most secret Hayagriva, they'll have a different form for Avalokiteshvara and so forth. And we can also think of the wisdom beings as sometimes having a different aspect. So what Geshe is saying is that the wisdom beings are not always in the aspect of a vajra. They're not always in the aspect of a vajra. In fact, when we first conceptualize of the wisdom beings, yeshe patambo konso lagi nampa perna droma yena chasama droma chung chung dabo. Right. So in fact, we can imagine, often it's imagined, like, for example, in the case of Tara, we would imagine forms of the 21 Taras completely filling space as the wisdom beings. So, sorry, millions and millions, like thousands and thousands, millions and millions filling the sky. And then these dissolve into the commitment being. Yeah. So when we visualize the wisdom beings, we actually want to visualize them as vast and numerous as possible, just like if you're trying to fill a jug of water that you want to take out on a hot day, you want to try to fill that jug of water to the very top. Yes. Then what happens is all of those wisdom beings dissolve into a single form. And then all of those wisdom beings will dissolve into you. So I think just to clarify something, Sam, which that was what I just briefly checked with Geshe. In the language here, the commitment being is yourself as the self-generation. So the wisdom beings are dissolving into yourself as the self-generation. Is that clear, or did you want to follow up? It's good? Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Dave, do you see anything in the various
social media?
socials?
No.
No, okay. It's
No.
a quiet day.
So
Geshe said, since it's a quiet day, he'll tell one. He saw. Emily, did you have another question or?
Oh, just maybe it will be revealed in the story, but and I really appreciate today's teachings. They're very very appropriate for now. But it said, don't grasp too tightly to your current situation. Does that mean, is the karma involved here? Like the current situation may change for the better or for the good, and you just have to accept everything?
Either or. Yeah, exactly. But I'll check that with Geshe.
Okay, it would be nice to hear more about that.
Nanso korwa ginetso halepe shukchempo madzin a karian sena gyurwa drogires, yaga drogires, duksha drogires, di yempa yindutsane halepe tempo yempa sanlo matanga, don't dag diribes. Yeah. So that's the important thing to remember, that in samsara, even when we're happy, that those moments of happiness are not stable. They are fleeting. And so why we want to think in that way and not grasp too tightly is so that we can aim at cultivating the causes that are going to lead us to a lasting, reliable happiness. It doesn't mean we don't need any samsaric happiness at all. Of course, we need, some measure of that, but we just don't want to grasp at it as something stable. That's the problem. Because when the causes for it are exhausted, that happiness is not always going to be there, right? We know that. So I think Emily, I think we answered your question, right? If not, let us know. But I think if that's all the questions, we'll close with a short story, Geshe said. So Shavji did it. So Geshe said that he's not sure if he's told this story before, but it involves a bald person. And this bald person came to mind because he sees my head from where he's sitting. He sees Dave's head in the TV, and then he thinks about his own head, which is also increasingly bald. So he thought about the story of the bald man. So this is a story of a lama, of a teacher and his student, and both a good teacher and a good student. Huh? Yeah. Yeah.
So
So this story illustrates a principle of the motivation. If one has a good or a kind motivation, even if the application, even if the actual activity is mistaken, because of that positive motivation, it can still sometimes lead to a positive result. Yeah, loso, loso.
Tani gege te gitu te te ripashara me bache ani ko ta ina yo ko na ko me yo bache ani gege te ta go kar ja kar es
So the teacher and the student, the student was a very a kind, good person, but he wasn't the brightest. And the teacher, he was a good teacher, but he was bald. I'm sorry, bald, and like a little bit direct sometimes.
ani go kar cha ta ko ripashara me gege te mo wala me was ta choro ani kor gi khoro so so go go ya pa ja shos.
And so the student asked the teacher, what should I meditate on? And knowing that like the student wasn't the sharpest, he wanted to recommend something easy. So he said, you can visualize me as the Lama at your crown and just start by trying to visualize that.
Ta gitu te ko ya non di was ta pa no ne go ja fikala ya ta ngaro gi thor go thor go ja se ge so mas kisela
Ale, los.
ko no so was
Ale, los.
gi sen koro ngol go shu dala was
Ale, los.
gitu tiga koro gi thor go shu dala so
Ale, los. So then so ko gegendi korang getu yures chik samgire dua. Jebo jane.
Jebo jane la.
Yeah.
Gitu koro gi thor.
Getrungi suk. But the student, as we said, he wasn't the brightest. So the student wasn't the brightest. And so he misunderstood the instruction. So whenever he saw his teacher, he would imagine that there was a version of him sitting on the teacher's head. So in other words, he was visualizing his form on top of the teacher's head.
어떤 녀마 가서 이나 좀 맞다 터치스 거기 자네 거 기기 돌 거라 되네 거자 어때 가서 못했는데 와서 길 뻔해 거마서
And so he tried this for like a week and he was very effortful in the meditation, but he was always uncomfortable. He thought that because the teacher was bald and his head was very sweaty, that he would slip off his teacher's big head and fall to the ground. So he felt uncomfortable doing the meditation.
So the
teacher asked the student, so how is the meditation going? Like, how did you find it? He said, it's nice. Like, I feel happy, but also in one way, it's really difficult. And he said, well, why is it difficult? And he said, because whenever I picture myself on your head, because your head is bald and sweaty, I always worry about myself falling off. Yeah.
But
the teacher, being kind of very skillful, he didn't want to like discourage the student by just telling him he was outright wrong. And he saw that like at least this instruction was causing him to put some effort into the practice and that there was some benefit. So he didn't want to just kind of tell him he was wrong and discourage him right away. So he said, well, try another way. Rather than saying he was wrong, he said, try another way. He said, reverse it and see that if you visualize me on your head, since you're not bald, maybe you can visualize me more effectively. Yes, so that was the story anyways that Geshe remembered. So even if you're mistaken, sometimes there's still some blessing, still some benefit if you have a good motivation and determination. So many reasons that good motivations are important and also beneficial. So thank you very much, everybody. We will leave it here. And don't forget, Saturday, Chakra Samvara, we have this class again next Sunday. And that Monday is going to be a short but special event for Chokor Duchen, Wheel Turning Day. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you, Geshe. Thank you, Ngodrup.
Thank you, Tashi Dalai.
Thank you.
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
you.